A beautiful and blinding morning, the world outside begins to breathe. See clouds arriving without warning. I need you here to shelter me. Welcome to the Voice of Reason. Mr. Director, have you heard about this? This is something that is quite perplexing. It's bothering me deep in my core. A thing called shreking is going around, and it needs to stop immediately. Have you heard about this? And to pay homage and an ode to the great films with Mike Myers and Eddie Murphy, among others, that great lovable character, the ogre known as Shrek. Yes, this is why they are calling this shreking. Now, for those who are not aware, shreking is a new dating term describing the act of dating someone you're not attracted to in hopes that they will treat you better. Now, just what the heck caused this? Because it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, because not that I'm an expert in this field by any means, but I have dated, and at least that initial attraction, perhaps a good indicator as to whether or not that relationship will work. And then you look, of course, at what binds you together, commonalities and practices, perhaps a shared faith to shared political ideology or similar interests. But to date someone you're not interested in or attracted to simply in hopes of being treated better. So this is derived from the animated movie Shrek, as I had mentioned, but with a negative connotation. This dating strategy can lead to a whole host of heartaches to heartbreaks to just downright stupidity. Now, why are people being shreked? Now, what is shreking? Breaking it down. The act itself is engaging in a relationship with a person you don't find attractive. Now, the motive is the hope of this person's kindness being fulfilled and better qualities in turn to run into improving your life or the treatment of others. But the outcome could lead to heartbreak for all parties. And why is this happening in 2025 America? And is it something that's mostly just from the millennial generation or Gen Zers who are perhaps dating more than others? But then there's also a high divorce rate here in this country. We know that, roughly 50% or more. So does this shreking so-called take place with some of the older generations? My conclusion, perhaps, this is all academic theory, not necessarily codified science, is feminism. And the idea of how it's really encroached upon all different aspects of society. So let's look at this. A man and a woman coming together in marital bliss. Really, a woman needed a man in so many ways for that income, to be the provider, to really celebrate those traditional roles. Something that people have gotten in trouble for supporting recently, including Harrison Butker from the Kansas City Chiefs, simply for congratulating and thanking his wife for being the great provider in her own way, and that's being really making the home a household, raising the children, taking care of them, taking care of daily duties that make a house truly a home for countless individuals who are members of that address. So I think part of it is that feminism aspect of, I don't need a man now because I have my own career. I'll do this on my time, which is all something to be respected. It's not something that the Voice of Reason is necessarily against. But what's it say about modern men in America? Is it all the handsome ones who are not taking responsibility, who are being beta males, not wanting to be the provider, not wanting to take life perhaps seriously, not having the ability to do so for various reasons, perhaps from addiction to just simply being spoiled, or maybe it's other issues. We do know from our friends in the media, people like Tucker Carlson, having done extensive research on the demographic truly failing in the United States, really happens to be Caucasian males in so many different ways. Now, that based movement, that MAGA mindset, you can kind of group that together, having a comeback to a certain extent with the last election, and so many of Gen Z and millennial Republicans, even Democrats, especially white men, attracted to the candidacy and the traditional nature of someone like a Donald John Trump. But I'm very interested in why this shreking seems to be taking place and why people are willing to simply put away biological attraction in order to pursue simply being treated better. So this is my advice out there. There may be many reasons for it. Again, an academic theory and many things I'm proposing tonight on The Voice of Reason. But guys, I've been out there. I get it. It's a rough dating field. There's no question about it. But some men miss on the fact that if you ask out a lady on a date, especially if it's dinner, cocktails, even a cup of coffee, for goodness sakes, pay for that evening together. You are asking for her time in return. I believe it is chivalrous to fund the evening. That's what men should do. Way back in the day, in fact, they used to give menus to the ladies that did not have prices on them. And the man would actually order on behalf of the entire table. Maybe a practice somewhat looked extreme now, but now you have the privilege of looking at calories on almost anything you order. If you go to a fast casual, say like a Chipotle down the street. So the world has changed in some ways for the better, in some ways not so much. But that is my own advice for the guys out there who are watching. Make sure that you are paying, and down the road, the more serious dating into perhaps an engagement or marriage, then discussing more of those splitting assets, uniting in those assets. And those are things I can get into Dave Ramsey and even a religious case for why you should share those bank accounts upon marriage. So it doesn't become, this is yours, this is mine, all of that. And that can be debated by very wise and very good people, one direction or another. There's not an end-all, be-all, or one-size-fits-all in that. It's also incumbent upon the ladies to recognize those great chivalrous men that still exist out there, and to perhaps choose that person that is the right one to marry. But in this situation of the shreking, I would advise against it, simply because if you're not attracted to someone, that's part of the biological science with all of this, is it not? It's being united in religion, in understanding of finances, in having that primal attraction, for lack of a better term, in order to make the world go round and round. So feel free to write to us here at Right Side Broadcasting Network, because I'm fascinated by this topic. I really just heard about it this week, shreking, and I feel bad for Shrek, that great movie character, the great portrayal by Mike Myers. I think he deserves better than that. But maybe it's all going back to things like Beauty and the Beast. It's all about what's in the heart, not necessarily what's on the outside. So feel free to write in if you wish to opine. And a funny side note on the Beauty and the Beast, a great film, whether it's the live action or the cartoon, a great story as well about how we could be transformed by our relationships and to turn away from inwardness and look to the outward into serving one another, especially in matrimony. But I really got a kick out of this one. Someone actually argued the case recently. You might be seeing it around Instagram, some other social media sites, that Gaston, the evildoer in The Beauty and the Beast, actually re-looked upon that character and said, wait a second, isn't he the hero in all this? Because he's got a group of women who are just a bunch of, for lack of a better term, hussies chasing him around town, and he's going to the gym. He's keeping himself in shape. He's reading up on books, not as much as Belle is, of course, but she's simply infusing some feminism into the argument and ignoring his very appropriate advances. Oh, and then, by the way, he goes and attempts to execute a beast in order to save the entire small town village there in the countryside of France. So there's two ways of looking at everything. Always keep that in mind when you are in the dating world. So I'll get off this dating topic because I don't know if I'm necessarily the expert, but as your humble correspondent who's full-fledged engaged in that point in life, trying to find the right one, there's always a story or two, and it's always entertaining. So much has gone on in the news this week regarding Chicago, Illinois, and not only the gerrymandering, a term that people might not have known about over the course of their careers, but definitely learned about that from Governor J.B. Pritzker with the Texas Exodus. And what we saw there, we've been analyzing it here at Right Side Broadcasting Network and right here on the Voice of Reason. But Illinois coming into the spotlight once again with that bizarre press conference early this week with Chicago communist elected officials, including the governor, J.B. Pritzker, to Mayor Brandon Johnson, Senators Tammy Duckworth, and Senator Dick Durbin, amongst others who want his position as he's a lame duck. He is retiring, thanks be to God. He's been in office longer than I've been alive and been in the United States Senate since I was a 9-year-old. So he dates back a bit, not to age the old communist, but it is time to say au revoir, Mr. Dick Durbin. Now, Juliana Stranton, the Lieutenant Governor of Illinois, Congressman Raja Krishnamurthy, also interested in that seat. Those communists were there on hand as well along that beautiful river front, the Chicago River, a place I really enjoy during the summer. Now, here's the kicker. Senator Tammy Duckworth gets up to the podium to speak and starts railing on the Trump foreign policy, one that's been peace through strength, that has seen countless leaders and governments, congressmen, senators, and those abroad nominating President Trump for the Nobel Peace Prize, including most recently the leadership in Cambodia and 70,000 Cambodian Buddhist monks, adding their names to that illustrious list of leaders throughout the fair, peace-loving world. And she's criticizing that. She's saying he's a puppet of Putin, saying that he's somehow part of the Russian government, all, again, hogwash and really a disgrace that she would say something like that, given the peace terms met the last couple of weeks and the pursuit of peace with the Alaska summit and the European leaders visiting the White House just days later. But sirens wailing in the background on a beautiful afternoon in Chicago when she said, there's no crime problem here. There's nothing to look at here. I think the proof is in the pudding. We have the opportunity to talk to a great leader dealing with just that tonight on the Voice of Reason. Welcome to the Voice of Reason. P-Rae Easley taking on a big fight in Chicago, Illinois, as a candidate for Congress in the 7th District. Talk to us about Illinois. It's been in the news, whether it's gerrymandering to Chicago's crime, to that group of, quite frankly, communists who got together to paint a very different picture of law and order. And all I seem to hear is housing and democracy. Give us your take as someone, as a resident of the great city of Chicago.
Well, firstly, thank you for having me on your show today. I am a 4th-generation Chicagoan. My great-grandmother, Maybelle Lee, left the great state of Mississippi in the 1940s, moved up here, and here I am. I love living in this city. I am a Chicago Public School graduate. I live on the west side of Chicago in the Austin community, which is America's largest Black American community. There are 85,000 of us who live in one neighborhood. So this is the blackest place you can ever be in America. And with that being said, we are dealing with an issue of lawlessness because we are unable to get justice through the Cook County courts. And that's because they are following the legislature that's pushed out in Springfield. Right now, we have what's called the Safety Act. The Safety Act states that we are a cashless bond state. That means that there are only certain crimes that someone can be detained for if they are detained at all. And so what the Safety Act has left us with is a lot of criminality on the street. There is a woman named Megan Boss. Megan Boss, she isn't in Cook County. She was a little north in Lake County, but she was found rotting in a vat of acid in the backyard of an illegal immigrant. So they took him to court. They charged him with desecrating a corpse, or desecrating a corpse, rather, and they let him go home. He was found with a dead body in the backyard and he went home. President Trump now is deporting him. We had another incident where a group of guys, 5 men, were in the car. They got pulled over. There were almost 90 rounds of ammunition in the car. They had extended magazines, drugs, you name it, it was going on in that car. They were incarcerated in Cook County Jail by one judge. They went back to court the next week and were released. So now they can go back outside and finish the hit that they got caught completing. It is complete lawlessness. We're also dealing with the Mexican drug cartel. El Chapo chose the west side of Chicago, where we are, specifically as his home turf for 3 specific reasons. One is because Chicago is a transportation hub. Every road in America leads to Chicago. We have 2 major international airports. All the rail lines lead here as well. That's why we had Sears here, the Sears Tower. We also have high Black male unemployment, which again is caused by legislative failure. And then we're a sanctuary city. So they know that their workers will not get nabbed by ICE. So now they are selling almost $2 billion worth of heroin a year down the expressway that runs through the middle of our community, which is I-290, which is nicknamed the Heroin Highway. When you have the heroin highway going in the middle of your neighborhood, you have all type of narco town problems. You got overdosing, you got leaning, you got rocking, you got stealing. You have stores closing because now you have the addicts going in the store stealing. You have shootings because people are robbing each other. You have crime. It is complete lawlessness, and we are not finding the justice through the courts. Now, to the police, their efforts, they make the arrests, okay? They will make the arrest, but it seems like the Cook County courts cannot make the charges stick. And it's really interesting because Chicago is the most surveilled city in the United States of America. There are cameras everywhere. So the cameras can catch you speeding, the cameras can catch you going through a red light, but the cameras are not catching murders. And again, it doesn't make any sense. So rather than continue to find comfort in this chaos, we're just going to move on. We got to get away from this Democrat machine because it was built to neglect us.
And historically, a different path that's been taken, because if you look back to the organized crime days of Al Capone, for example, they got this guy on tax evasion. But even back then, I mean, you have a pro-America criminal, unlike now. It's been an invasion of these people. Like you said, El Chapo, a foreign terrorist, quite frankly, thanks to President Trump's designation with MS-13 and the border cartels to Trinidad and Aragua, who are just devastating the city. And it bothers me as well, P-Rae, because I grew up in the western suburbs. I've lived in Chicago, right on Sheffield and Waveland. I love the city. And like your family coming to that Chicago, I came from Italian immigrant and Irish immigrant backgrounds, and they came to Chicago for a better way of life. You know, family was there. They came from the old country to pursue that American dream. And for me, it's been the reverse effect that your family experienced. I moved down south to get out of the craziness because there's more common sense down the southeast with better Republican policies really have taken place since late 1990s, give or take. But do you know why they can't find these murders on the camera? To your point, that's exactly my question. They can find about just everything else. And like I mentioned before with Al Capone, it was tax evasion. It was all these other things in order to bust these guys. Just where the hell is this footage going?
We don't know. I always say that this is some type of sociopathic operation where they're just watching people commit crimes, but they don't want to do anything. I know people who were shot on the camera, who were victims on camera, and the police and the investigators will tell them, well, the quality of the footage isn't strong enough for us to build a case. So why is the camera here? You see what I'm saying? It's like it's a game. But again, we're done with it. And the people look at the city and they'll say, well, Chicago, you guys voted for this. This is what you want. You don't vote anything but Democrat. I want everybody to understand how the machine works. The machine will punish you if you step out of line. So growing up, my father and I were political spark partners. He graduated from Northern Illinois University with a degree in history. So every day of my life was a history and a political science lesson. And so one day I told him, Daddy, we did all this studying. Why are we Democrats? That does not make any sense. We need to be Republicans. The Democrats are the Confederacy. The Klan is their guerrilla warfare arm. They keep us held down in the city. Like, why are we still here? And he's like, shut your mouth, Ray. Don't you ever say that again. I don't want you to ever think that again in the city of Chicago, because if someone hears you saying that outside of this house, they will stop picking up our trash. They will stop shoveling the snow in front of our house. They can come and put fines and liens on our building. Do not ever go against the machine. So that's why people keep voting for this. Even like me running as a Republican, I'm out here, I'm getting my signatures. I'm talking to people, they're like, listen, I'm gonna vote for you, but I cannot sign that petition. Because if I sign that petition, they'll see that I support a Republican and I'll get my contracts taken away. So that's why we want the president to not only bring troops, but also bring Pam Bondi and her prosecutors. That's the army that we need here, because this is voter suppression and it's domestic terrorism.
And we know as well, the federal government has requested the voter rolls of Illinois, which is thrilling for us who have been involved either in fair maps or just the fair registrations, because the big joke was, and there's a lot of seriousness to us, go back to 1960. There was a case that Richard Nixon really could have sued JFK via then Mayor Daley regarding those so-called voters that may have no longer been living at the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was, and that's what I'm saying. This is the Chicago way. You know that maybe 2 years ago, they found an address over here in the Little Village area that had 26 people listed there. No, not 26, almost 50 people listed there at one address, 1-2 flat, and all those people were in there voting. How? Because they're cooking the books. And then to take it a step further, the state of Illinois now registers you automatically when you go to renew your licenses, but then they also made it legal for illegals to go get licenses. So our question has always been, how are you all differentiating between legal and non-legal people if the state does not collect that information? So anybody who goes to Secretary of State has the chance of being registered to vote.
Very interesting. And
yeah, it's all crazy.
It really is. It's upended. And you have Alexi Janulius, who is not very trustworthy given his business background, but I'll leave that at that for the moment. Simply put everything else to the side. Let's just play devil's advocate. Oh, it's the safest, freest area. There's no political machine, which we know that that's not true. But why doesn't the governor, J.B. Pritzker, just simply call up President Trump, someone who has said on countless occasions, including this week, at the longest ever cabinet meeting that we know of in the modern day, over 3 hours, speaking with those press officials at the White House, hey, I want to work with Republicans, Democrats, everyone. I want people to stop dying. That's been his mission, whether it's Russia and Ukraine or the city of Chicago, Illinois, Los Angeles, California. But no, it's Governor J.B. Pritzker wants to play these political stunts. Am I wrong about that?
No, you're telling the truth. JB would rather for people to die in the city of Chicago than acquiesce power. This whole governorship for JB Pritzker is about power and ego. His family, they're pushing this transgendering through the children. Now they're doing mental health assessments to assess the children's sexual preference and gender, all kind of weird stuff that we did not ask for. All we want is safety and security, a thriving economy, so that in the wintertime we can buy heavy coats and nice boots, right? That's all a good Chicagoan wants. But it's like they are purposely hurting us And Chris Kennedy, while running for governor against J.B. Pritzker, stated that J.B. and Rahm Emanuel were engaged in a campaign of strategic gentrification to push Black people out of the city and the state to make Chicago smaller and wider. And that's exactly what's going on. So that's why I call it domestic terrorism, because they're using the machine to terrorize us off of our land, just like they did down in Mississippi, which is why our ancestors came up to Chicago, running away from what? Racist Democrats. They just won't leave us alone.
P-Rae, I'm glad you brought that up, because even in the Virginia gubernatorial race this year, 2025, it was just exposed at a rally saying to Lieutenant Governor Winsome Sears, who at times has been at odds with President Trump, but has spoken frankly as the Republican candidate for governor. This was a sign by someone at a Democrat rally. Hey, Winsome, if trans can't share your bathroom, then Blacks can't share my water fountain. I mean, it's disgusting. It's disturbing. And we see this continued pattern by the far left Democrat base that seems to have not changed since the 1860s or even before.
So that's who they've always been since the early 1800s. They don't like Negro people. They don't like us. I don't know why people can't grasp this, but it's honestly because they use foreign Black people to speak on behalf of the Democratic Party, like Barack Obama or Kamala Harris. They come and they try to jive with the tribe, and then they think that they're speaking on our behalf. And it's like, whoa, two different tribes. We're not the same people. You don't see the Venezuelan natives coming up here and trying to speak on behalf of Cherokee business. That doesn't happen, but that only happens to us. And so this is why this message is not getting through. However, we've been very successful with it here in Chicago. Voter apathy is at an all-time high, which is why now we're scooping those people up and bringing them to the Republican Party, because we're telling them they don't like us. Your grandmother ran away from them in Mississippi. Your mother came up here to Chicago. They gave her subpar housing. They flooded your neighborhood with drugs. And then after everybody got clean and started buying houses, then they tricked them out of those homes through the subprime crisis, and then used the first Black president to take 70% of our collective wealth with him after he left office. So that's everything that we've ever earned since coming into this country. We lost 70% of it under Barack Obama. That is a Democrat. That's what they do. They love to take our wealth. They love to keep us dysfunctional and nervous and upset, because that's how they grasp power. It's all about control. And you can't bully Chicago people. You know that. So we just got to move on.
P-Rae Easley, speaking truth to power. Where can we find your congressional campaign? And where can the viewers help support you in this endeavor to make Chicago great again?
So you can go to ChicagoRED.org. That's my organization. We are the ones who are doing the real boots on the ground, doing policy work, shaking hands, making friends, making sure that they understand that this conversation has to be holistic. And then on Facebook, you can follow my campaign page at P-Rae FOR7, like P-Rae 47, because the 7th Congressional District, and 47, like my Donnie. Shout out to President Trump. And that's where we'll be building out the campaign. I've never run for office before at this level. I did win an election here as alternate delegate to the RNC in the district, and I got 3,065 votes with no campaigning in a very, very, very blue district. So we feel like we definitely have a chance. And go to ChicagoRED.org if you want to support, if you want to watch what we're doing, but just know that we are winning, and we're winning big.
Well, please say hello to the community and how much we admire it here at the Voice of Reason, because we hear the voices, we pray often for those who stand up like you, truth to power, and a mayor, Brandon Johnson, who is not listening to the residents of this fair city, this great city that has influenced my life, my career. And my prayer is that Chicago and Illinois could be made great again with common sense policies.
Amen.
P-Rae Easley, thank you again for joining us on The Voice of Reason, candidate for Congress in the 7th Congressional District of Illinois. Come back and see us at Right Side Broadcasting Network very soon.
Thank you. Anytime.
Now it's time for the winner of the week. None other than the 13th century hero, King Louis IX. He's considered a saint in the Catholic Church and a defender of Christendom, having appropriately executed and moved forward on the 7th and 8th Crusades, ultimately sacrificing his life for others. And his feast day was this week, and worth celebrating, worth noting, because think about leaders like St. Louis IX of France, who were willing to shelter and care for the poor, defend their people, care for the overall health of their nation. He was a monarch who was led by the grace and the gifts of God on high, and someone who took the throne at a rather young age in order to secure Christendom against Islamic invaders. It's a great history to read about medieval Europe and who were the key players, but also who justly served in their roles and those who did take advantage and change the shape of Western civilization and world history as a whole. But our winner this week, his feast day to celebrate and to remember, none other than King Louis IX of France. St. Louis IX, someone to really read about, learn from, and perhaps use some of those qualities of leadership in whatever it is that you do. And so I would say the losers of this week, perhaps those modern politicians, those who are focused on making childish arguments in one direction or another. We've seen it especially with governors like J.B. Pritzker in Illinois, who have called the gerrymandered maps that they wrote into law simple kindergarten scratch, and that he had nothing to do with that. Can you imagine if our modern politicians were like great leaders of the past? And perhaps someone or some of them will end up being remembered as great ones in the history books. I think the gentleman portrayed by bobbleheads behind me will be one of those individuals as it becomes more clear day by day, especially after having a record-breaking, a record-long cabinet meeting this week. And think about that cabinet, a group of people who have come together to pledge their lives, their sacred honor, their fortunes, literally their family's health and their well-being on the line to make America great again. So think about that as you enter into this fall football season and the great leaders we have had in the past and those who continue to give us a little bit of a headache at late at night and early in the morning. Maybe it's your turn to replace them as we approach 2026. Now, for this day in history, it is a big one for a number of different reasons. The March on Washington. In 1963, Martin Luther King leading that charge for civil rights. And that coincided on the National Mall at the Lincoln Memorial with I Have a Dream, a speech that all should study, all should remember, all the young people out there watching, perhaps try to memorize that and really listen to the words by Dr. Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. as he looked out to that glowing, reflecting pool onto Washington. It was a moment that for those there we'll never forget, looking upon the Washington Monument and really calling for the fulfillment of what was initially envisioned by this great nation, now nearly 250 years young. And that sadly coincided with the murder of Emmett Till that has stuck with a lot of African Americans and members of the black community for countless generations. He was only a 14-year-old boy abducted and brutally murdered and his body dumped into a river in Mississippi. Someone is originally from Chicago, Illinois. And this was after allegedly whistling at a white woman who was 21 years old at the time, but this was in violation, unbeknownst to him, a 14-year-old boy at a gas station, against the Jim Crow laws of the South. May Jim Crow never return. It's an evil ideology, and it was brought to us by the Democrat Party and by racists. So a tragic moment in 1955 on August 28th. And just again, 8 years later, Martin Luther King would give that riveting "I Have a Dream" speech in our nation's capital. Be sure to catch us next week for a dash of classic Western flair, punchlines, politics, commentary, and everything that matters to you at home. Thank you for watching The Voice of Reason every Thursday night at 6 o'clock. Until then, be good. God bless. We'll see you soon.